If nothing else, Full Spectrum Warrior is a one-of-a-kind game. Here's this game that started its life as a military simulation commissioned by the Army, and only later did it become this tactical squad-based real-time strategy game of sorts with action elements, and that puts you kind of right in the thick of the action. You're following along with these men as they're dodging bullets and returning fire against these heavily entrenched foes. The game gives a truly great first impression. It looks outstanding, it sounds really impressive and lifelike. The thing is, though, the gameplay itself often feels like a string of puzzles whose solutions are pretty obvious. The game's tactical options, though they seem to be pretty diverse, are actually pretty limited in practice due to the linear and pretty straightforward level design in the game. Basically, by the time you reach the conclusion of Full Spectrum Warrior's campaign, which you could play either solo or cooperatively over Xbox Live, you'll have long since gotten used to the gameplay and it'll have become rather monotonous in a lot of ways. With that said, Full Spectrum Warrior is definitely a very good game. It's interesting and it's impressive in a lot of ways. It's just not quite as great as it probably could have been. The game begins with a MOUT training session which walks you through all the elements of play and really does a good job of teaching you the ropes. This training sequence also does a great job of setting the atmosphere for the game. You yourself don't represent a specific character in the game. You're this disembodied kind of force moving with the characters, and you'll see as your view kind of bounces along beside them as they're running from point to point, as though you're kind of an entrenched video journalist or something like that. Perhaps it's a testament to the Army's MOUT training, but this training session at the beginning of the game is so good that it teaches you pretty much everything you'll need to know about the gameplay, and there really isn't much of a learning curve to tackle after that. One of the strangest things about Full Spectrum Warrior's gameplay is that in most cases you can never actually kill an opponent just by shooting at him from the front. When both your fire team and the enemy are behind cover, they simply cannot get hit by one another's fire. It's one of these gameplay contrivances that turns this into a strategy game versus an action game. This really is a strategic game about outmaneuvering rather than outshooting, and that's why the firing is taken out of your hand. As you maneuver through each mission, you'll come across foes entrenched and firing at you, so you'll do one of several different things. You might lay down suppressive fire so that your second fire team can advance and take out the foe through some back alley, which will be readily marked on your GPS system. Or you might lay down a smoke grenade so that you could run to a more advantageous location without any risk of being shot, since enemies will simply cease fire when there's a smoke grenade in front of them. In practice, there's usually just one or two obvious ways in which to bypass the opponent, and then you kind of rinse and repeat, and occasionally you'll be beset by ambushes as you advance. Enemies might just start firing on you from the rear or something like that. You might die and fail the mission and then reload from the last save point, but then you'll know where the enemies are going to pop up, so there really isn't much necessity to approach cautiously when you could just kind of take a save and reload approach. One of the reasons Full Spectrum Warrior's campaign isn't terribly involving is that the enemy artificial intelligence pretty much flat out sucks. Enemies will simply fire at you and won't do much else. You'll sometimes see them strategically retreat or strategically ambush you, but these tend to be very scripted moments that play out the same way each time. Otherwise, you'll see enemies do totally boneheaded things like keep firing to the side, whereas you've got them flanked and are sending dozens of bullets their way. They won't run for cover. Fortunately, your own squad is a lot smarter, and in fact, your own squad does a lot of the work for you. Your guys are going to lie down and go prone if they're caught in the line of fire. They'll return fire if in danger. They'll keep their heads down. They'll look around corners to spot any enemy units in the vicinity. Co-op over Xbox Live is actually very straightforward. All that happens is you have half the amount of control that you normally would. You control one fire team of 4 men rather than 2 fire teams of 4. And for the most part, it's just not quite as fun to only control one fire team and end up having to wait around for your partner to do his job. The game also features 2 different difficulty options, the default of which is actually rather easy and the harder of which is very hard. It features more greater enemy numbers and is far less forgiving of your errors. It's hard even to the point that if you finish the game on normal, you'll have a tough time getting through the hard mode intact. By the time you finish the campaign on normal, you'll have probably grown weary of the gameplay here. Full Spectrum Warrior truly is a unique game though, and it's played from this unique perspective and does offer a lot of strategic interest, even though it doesn't offer a lot of tactical realism. It plays more like a puzzle game than like a true strategy game, and it certainly isn't really an action game, so don't go into it expecting a shooter. Don't go into it expecting much of anything, for that matter, because Full Spectrum Warrior is one of a kind. It has a few issues with the gameplay, and these things keep it from achieving true greatness and from having long-term lasting appeal. But the game's incredible presentation and its unique style and atmosphere do contribute to a game that's very good overall. So do check it out if you've been looking forward to it.